Oh, it's pretty good. We have the point lead. We're lacking a little bit of pace, but everything's gone to plan, so we haven't had huge disasters happen. So virtual racing school is up front. We know the season is basically split up into different builds, you know, so we get a build in March every year, which is what we just got, and then we get one in June, which is the next one, and I think that'll be the next iteration of the tire model, the V7. So I'm excited about that. I haven't read much into it, but you know, there's usually improvements that come along with everything. And then there's another one in September, which is around when the playoffs are. So you know, however you're running right now doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be running the same way if there's big physics changes like we're expecting in June. So yeah, right now we're all right. We need a little bit more speed, but who knows what'll happen, you know, just 2 months down the road. Well, I think things are pretty good. We have Nick Shelton as a new guy on the team, and last race he almost won, so that was good. We had slip angle cars. We had 3 of us in the top 6. Chris Overland finished 6th. Bobby Zelensky is he's the main setup guy. He's really talented and just kind of knows what to adjust. And the rest of us mostly will do runs or we'll do, you know, give feedback. And I think he crashed out, or he got wrecked early and the caution didn't come out, so he spent the rest of the race recovering, and I think he ended up like 16th. So overall, and Brandon Pipgrass was running like top 5, and he had computer issues with like 20 laps to go. So if none of those things had happened, we could have placed everybody on the slip angle in the top 10, I'm pretty sure. You know, VRS has simplified the way that we look at telemetry. Normally with the other programs, you have to, just setting them up on the computer is a pain. There's so many different things you have to do, and workbooks you have to install and things like that. And so I think a lot of people don't even install them on the computer because it's just a hassle. So VRS, you know, it just lets you go on the website and it's all just there and it's all simplified. And we gave feedback as drivers as to what we want to see. And you know, for the stock car stuff, we mostly care about the ride heights and the splitter and how it's sealing off. Aero is such a huge thing that we're mostly concerned with that, and VRS allows us just to look at that stuff. And then it allows us, every time we do a run, we have the program running in the background. It records our lap times for us. It tells us what our lap time average was. So all that is just right there for us, and we can use it and gather data really quickly and see if we're improving on our setup or making it worse. Yeah, so we can log in and you can create a team on Virtual Racing School website, and then you choose, you know, who's part of that team. And once people are put into that team, you have access to each other's data. You have access to each other's telemetry, lap times, and setup. You can see which setup they ran, and you know, normally we'll use Facebook to share setups amongst each other. But if for whatever reason somebody did a run late at night and they didn't get a chance to upload the setup, you can, you know, the next day you can just log on, check VRS, and it'll tell you what setup they were using. You can just download it right to your computer. Yeah, well, again, with VRS, you can look at people's lap times and you can see what lines they ran, and you can see, you know, the delta through the lap and where you're losing time, where you're gaining time. I know for me, I especially use it at the road course we go to every year. So, you know, this year we'll be going to Sonoma like last year, and last year I didn't run very well there, and Bobby won the race. So I'll be relying on that, and then just looking at his braking points, his marks, and that's kind of what when we do that every week. You know, if anybody has some sort of problem, we just tell them, you know, check my VRS, and it's, you know, all the inputs are there, the braking, the lines you use. So, you know, a lot of the stuff that it's difficult to explain to somebody is just visually right on the website. Yes, yeah, it's and I think we're seeing a lot of that in the real world. I believe NASCAR is letting teams now sort of check out everybody's telemetry, and I know some of the drivers were not very happy about that, where, you know, but this, we're still kind of where it used to be, as far as teammates have always usually been allowed to look at each other's inputs, braking and turning and gas and things like that. And we're out there, we're fighting for hundredths of a second, thousandths of a second. So any little change in your inputs will make that difference, especially over a run, and VRS allows us to really pinpoint where we're gaining or losing time. That's Indianapolis every year, over and over and over, pretty much. It's the race. It's my favorite track. It's for some reason, you know, I like hitting the turns there, and it's just enjoyable, even though the straights are really long and you can just kind of take a nap between corners. There's something about that track that I really enjoy, and every year I kind of mark it on the calendar. And this year we start the playoffs there, so that's that could be a ticket to Homestead. Well, I've wanted, you know, the short tracks to be there, because we always go to Richmond. I got my first career win at Martinsville, which I wish we went to Martinsville, and we haven't gone to Bristol since 2011, I believe. So, well, it's the final race of the regular season, so hopefully I'm locked into the playoffs by that race, and I can just not worry about anything. And but yeah, it'll be fun. I haven't even raced Bristol in forever. So I don't know how the lanes work. I don't know if it's still around the top. You know, maybe we can tell iRacing to put some grip strip on the bottom like NASCAR does. Yeah, well, you know, one of the biggest values besides the data pack is the coaching. You know, the one-on-one coaching. And I've seen, you know, where I've coached drivers of many different, you know, skill sets. You know, new people that are completely new to sim racing, and they don't, you know, some people don't actually know how to negotiate a corner. You know, they'll just go into the turn and they'll just make the turn, but they don't really know what they're doing. They don't know what an apex is or what arcing is. And, you know, usually I'll do a 1 hour session, and I'll have drivers go out there and do some laps, and I'll just watch for a few laps and just kind of see, okay, you know, how are they hitting the marks? You know, who am I instructing? And then there I can just kind of, I'll know which direction to take as far as instruction. Is it going to be very, very basic, or is it going to be, okay, is this driver like pretty high level already and I need to, you know, instruct them in a different way? But I've seen drivers improve, you know, tens, maybe sometimes seconds, you know, it depends how far off they are. And a lot of it's just knowing, you know, drivers go into the corner and they just think, or if it's an oval, I'll just go there and make a left and come out, you know, and then they don't know why they lost 3/10. And I'm able to go out there on the track with them and show them the exact line, or where they need, you know, their turning points, or where they need to let off the gas and things like that. And if you're at a 3,000 I rating, which would be considered above average, I believe the average is around 1,500 nowadays. You're really not that far. You're talking maybe a tenth or two in a lap. And I think with proper coaching, or even just knowing information, you can improve those times. And, you know, everything happens really slowly as far as improvements just in general. You know, rarely do you just go from, you know, back of the pack to front of the pack. It's a slow process, and then we can speed that up a bit just by letting people know where they're missing time and being on the track with them one-on-one and talking to them. And I think you can get a lot of stuff done in an hour. I don't think so. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people think it's just a setup shop. You know, I'll have a lot of people asking me, hey, should I join VRS? Do they have good setups? And it's way more than that. In fact, the setups were, I think, the latest thing they've added. It's, you know, the biggest value is being able to look at the drivers on there and how they drive. And obviously this is not just for the NASCAR stuff. This is, The roadside has a whole bunch of data packs to look at, really good, world championship caliber champions on there. And then obviously, you can go and be coached by one of those drivers. So I think it gives you access. So anytime you join a new activity or a new hobby or anything, you want to have a place where you can say, you know what, I want to talk to the best people at this, and I want to have them teach me. And Virtual Racing School has some of the best drivers on there that you have access to and gain information from them. And I think that's way more valuable than just logging on and downloading a setup and having no idea how to drive it. Yeah, well, we heard earlier this year that NASCAR was looking into an esports series. So at this point, we are kind of on a holding pattern as far as to see what happens. I think we're seeing a lot more NASCAR involvement in social media and on their website, things like that. And from iRacing, we've gotten that they're working in the background just to make this into a bigger thing. And esports in general they're on the up and up. Sim racing is a little bit trailing. It's racing in general is not as popular as other forms of even other sports or other forms of gaming. But I think there's a great future in it. People nowadays, I think a lot of the attendance issues you'll see in real life racing is because people want to participate in what they're doing. They don't want to watch anymore. They actually want to do it. So, and with other sports, it's relatively inexpensive to just buy a basketball and go to a basketball court, or you buy a baseball and bat and you practice, or things like that, throw a football around. Where with racing you need a car, and it's very expensive, and sim racing allows you to just do that from home. And yeah, you may not be in the car and getting the adrenaline rush of moving through time and space, if you will, but it's the closest thing you can get, and it's very competitive and it's very fun, and there's ways to make pretty good money from racing on your computer nowadays, and it's only getting better. And I think sponsors are realizing that this is becoming more and more popular, and I think the more sponsors we get and the more awareness of sim racing we get, it'll grow even bigger. I think a lot of it applies, a huge portion of it. Whenever I've been karting or any sort of driving in the real world, it's basically it's like sim racing, and then you have the G-forces and things like that you can just train for. I know there's a misconception out there that people think that a top sim racer can just get in a cup car and go and be cup champion immediately. It's not the case. But I think that if you are successful in the simulator, it already puts you way ahead of somebody who's never sim raced at all, or is somebody just starting into sim racing. I think it really, the drivers on iRacing, especially at the top level, have so much knowledge of racing and how to negotiate a corner, how to race around people, the racecraft itself. If there's one thing that directly correlates, is how you race around other cars. The actual feel of the car may be a little bit different because, of course, you're not having those G-forces, you're not having those vibrations and the heat and things like that. But racing around other cars and the decisions you make in the sim are almost identical to what you would do in the real world. So I think it's a gold mine. I think the real world racing industry should start looking a lot into the top series at all these levels, whether it's NASCAR or the open wheel or the endurance side, the rally cross. All of these have very, very talented drivers in it that don't have the funds, don't have the means to go racing in the real world, but they're showing what they can do, in a simulator. Yeah, I mean, we see how big simulators are even just in the real world. Teams are using sims more and more and more, and they're using programs to read telemetry and read how drivers drive. Back in the good old days, drivers just said what they were doing, or they lied about it. I was wide open that whole lap. you know, prove it. You can't not prove that, you know. So now you can actually see what drivers are doing, and I think, you know, virtual racing school could easily be a great way to bridge that gap between, you know, getting used to the real world. Yeah, we have, everybody has pretty much, you know, a dedicated team behind the scenes. I know Sal Forsetto does a lot of my spotting. Chris Hennion, he makes the pit adjustments. Liam Brotherton's on there saying lap times every lap, and you know, he's the lap time guy. And you know, overall, we have, you know, just a whole lot of people looking at the race just to see what's happening. I know as a driver, I don't personally care too much about the car low and car high, but I do want to know what's going on in the race. I do want to know who's running what line, or what time the leader's running at that point, or what the pit strategy is. So, you know, it's very difficult to do all this alone. You definitely need, you know, a lot of just people power, and just letting you know what's going on. You know, much like the real world, they have a crew there, you know, letting the driver know what's going on in the race. Yeah, so different teams are organized differently. I know for Slip Angle, our team owner, you know, slash manager is Lisa Pineda, and she does a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of work with our marketing. I think we are the most well put together team in the series, and we've been that way for the past 4 years. And overall, you know, on Slip Angle, we take it seriously. We take the brand seriously, and, you know, we take the racing seriously. We want this to progress and to only get better, and we want, you know, sim racing as a whole to really become something you can make a living off of. And, you know, we have a lot of fun while racing. If, you know, on the racing communications, you would never think we'd be a serious team, but we want to be successful. We take it very seriously as far as how much effort we put into showing up to the track and racing our competitors cleanly, and just doing a good job and making the series look good. Well, it just depends on the personalities and who's racing. You know, some drivers, they don't want to hear anything, or they'll just mute everyone. And then other drivers will talk all race like me. I like just knowing information, and I usually have no problems talking a lot and things like that. I think it distracts me from the focus. If you focus too hard, it almost feels like you start making mistakes. So I like talking a lot, but it's just a good time. You know, everybody gets along, and even when we don't get along, somebody will make sure you get along. So you know, it ends up usually being a pretty good time on radio communications. Number 2, well, that goes all the way back to kindergarten. You know, my last name starting with an A means we were put in alphabetical order, just basically, you know, all of grade school. So I was always either number 1, number 2, or number 3. And I think in kindergarten, I went and sat down at my desk, and there was a huge number 2 on it. And I was number 2 on the alphabetical list. And I guess, you know, when you're a little kid and they put just a huge number on your desk, you just look at that number and you're like, that's me now, I'm number 2, you know? So I started rooting for everybody that was number 2 in sports, and became a Rusty Wallace fan. I became a Derek Jeter fan, you know, so, and then of course I just ran the number 2 everywhere I could. It's always a lot easier to see it when you look back. You know, when I started, it's been almost 10 years now since I started on iRacing. And, you know, back then it was just late models and Legends cars, and it was you know, it was the hot new thing, and people were moving on from NASCAR 2003 pretty much to iRacing, and some did a little bit of R Factor there in the middle, here and there. But I know for me, iRacing's pretty much been the only sim I've run. I've tried others here and there, but they don't bring the same. It's just not the same environment. You know, iRacing it just brings everybody together. The organization, the online structure, you just can't match that anywhere else. You know, there's other simulators that provide good driving experiences, but you're just alone on the track, or, you know, the servers just aren't as good, or, you know, you join online and everybody's warping left and right, and it doesn't really feel like you're racing against other people. And with iRacing, it's probably my favorite part. It's just the competition. It brought everybody together. And then, you know, they announced the World Championships and racing for all this money and the broadcasts, and just knowing that you're going to race against the best drivers, I think is you know, is the biggest thing, and just the way the whole system works. I think they've come a long way, and I mean, we have dynamic tracks now. You know, we have tracks that rubber up and stuff. This is stuff 10 years ago we were dreaming about. We were like, man, maybe, you know, maybe someday the tracks will gain rubber, you know, and somebody would immediately, you know, you idiot, that's not ever gonna happen. Are you serious? You know, rubber on a virtual track, and now we have that. We've had that for almost 3 years already. So, you know, always, I know, and I get stuck on the dynamic track thing just because it's one of the most difficult things to model. I don't really know much about that, but just knowing how much it can change through a race in the real world. You know, teams don't really understand it that well in the real world either, and we're trying to simulate something that's not very well understood already. So, yeah, I think it just blows my mind that we're actually legitimately talking about grooves losing and gaining grip through a race, and having to ask our spotters, you know, where the leader is running, or, you know, is that driver behind me that's catching me, you know, are they running high, are they running low? That's stuff we would never talk about before. It was just, everybody just ran one lane and that was it, and if you couldn't run that lane, you're done. And now it's not like that. So that's pretty cool. Very much. I know it's a big topic of discussion, and it's a polarizing thing apparently, or some people think it'll ruin iRacing because, you know, it'll disrupt the you're only racing against humans thing. But I had a lot of fun back in the day with AI on NASCAR 2003. I would even watch AI races. I would customize the ratings on them. I'd have the real life paint schemes for the grid, and I would just straight up watch the races, and it'd just be entertaining, you know. And I can't think of a more fun thing than to get your teammates from whatever team you're on, maybe 5 or 10 of you or however many there is, and jump out there and get 30 or 40 AI cars, and all of you start in the back of the pack, and whoever gets to the front first wins. That is, and if you crash the whole field, who cares? You know, they're AI cars. Nobody's gonna be all mad about it and safety rating, and I'm gonna protest you and this, you know. So I'm looking forward to AI. I think it's a great thing, and I can't wait. Yeah, thanks for having me.